Most school leaders think community engagement means sending out the survey, hosting a focus group, or presenting a strategic plan at a board meeting and hoping, please, that people get behind it. And that's exactly why it doesn't work, because that process is boring. There's a difference between a strategic plan that sits on the shelf and one that actually transforms a district. Most districts, I'm sorry to say, they do it backwards. They build the vision first, then they try to sell it to the community. And every time they're shocked when opposition shows up, when parents push back, when business leaders disengage, when teachers feel like change is just being done to them. You can't sell people on a future that they didn't help create. I'm going to say that again. You can't sell people on a future they didn't help create. So flip the script. Stop broadcasting and start convening. See what happens when you get 130 people in a room, from clergy to kindergarten teachers to local business owners to students, and you let them build the vision. My guests today, Jeff Axelbank and Drew Howick, they've run this process. It's called Future Search across school districts of every size. And the results will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about strategic planning. I'm Danny Bauer, and this is Better Leaders, Better Schools, the original Ruckus cast for visionary leaders who want to do school different, even within the traditional confines of education, so that students are excited to show up because you've created a campus experience worth showing up for. Thanks to Ruckus makers just like you, the show ranks in the top 1% of nearly 4 million podcasts. So thanks for pressing play, and we'll be right back with the main content after a quick message from our show sponsors. Looking to create the kind of campus experience students never forget? ODP Business Solutions transforms ordinary spaces into extraordinary learning environments. Visit odpbusiness.com/education and let's do school different. That's odpbusiness.com/education. As districts look ahead to the coming school year, the groundwork starts earlier than you might think. The way professional learning is designed can shape culture, collaboration, and stability long before students arrive. Frontline Education's 2026 K-12 Lens Report takes a closer look at how districts are connecting professional growth to stronger staffing stability. Download the full report at frontlineeducation.com/leaders to learn more. That's frontlineeducation.com/leaders. As a school leader, time is your greatest resource, and there is a real sense of urgency when it comes to getting students what they need right now. That's why I love IXL's Universal Screener. In 20 minutes or less, you can identify students in need of intervention. And IXL's Learning Adaptive platform makes differentiating instruction easy. As students learn, IXL adjusts to the right level of difficulty for each individual student. Get started today at ixl.com/leaders. That's ixl.com/leaders. All right. And Drew and Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Well, we connected. You have this future search methodology, which is really, really interesting, and would love to dig into that. And can you maybe unpack, like, how is this applied to the context of education?
Yeah. So both Jeff and I went to a training course maybe 20-ish years ago by Marv Weisbord and Sandra Janoff, and they essentially created this methodology, and it applies to any time you want to improve a large system. And people around the world have been exposed to this methodology, have used it in a variety of different circumstances and situations. It is one which I saw an opportunity to use that methodology in education. 20-ish years ago, a relatively local school district board of education contacted me and said, "Hey, we'd like to get the input of our community into our strategic plan. What methods do you have to bring in the community? We don't want to do focus groups or surveys, etc." And I had just come back from the
Yeah.
training. I said, "Brilliant. I have a methodology." And I brought in someone who had done these multiple times, and we tag teamed on it, and that was the start of introducing it to public education that I'm aware of. And since then, I've done over 60 of these whole systems communications in the last 20 years or so.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, and this was the first time that I heard about it, and so that's why I wanted you guys, to come and explain the methodology, to ruckus makers checking out the show, whether they're listening, watching. And one of the things that I was curious about is it's really about bringing everybody to the table, bringing people together, right? And so, how does this future search methodology bring people together?
Yeah, well, Jeff and I talked about this in preparation for this conversation, and we thought maybe using an example of a specific school district would be helpful, so we can see the dynamics of
Okay.
how this comes together. So Jeff and I actually tag team on one future search in a suburb district in the state of Wisconsin together. So we've chosen that one, and so the superintendent, Dr. Smith, which actually is his real name,
Okay.
came to us, and he was just appointed superintendent. He had been in the district for many years, and he followed a very well-known, well-respected superintendent who was there 20 or so years. So Dr. Smith
Right.
wanted to introduce himself to the community, differentiate himself from his predecessor, and he saw a community engagement process as a way to do that and to help shape the district's future strategic plan. So Dr. Smith reached out to explore all sorts of possibilities on how to engage the community. He considered surveys, focus group, retreat style engagement, stakeholder interviews, etc. And he really believed in the whole idea of getting the whole system together and have a conversation. So this was a community that his school district served. There's 8 buildings, 35,000 residents. No major conflicts were going on. It wasn't a conflict resolution approach to dealing with something. It was really just getting the citizens together to see if they could find a shared common ground vision for the future of that district. And so as he was putting together his comprehensive new strategic plan, he thought this would be a great way to get some data that would help them shape that plan so that the plan really reflect the values of the community and the priorities of that community. So the district had a good strategic plan when he took over. It just didn't represent a lot of the stakeholder voices that he felt would be helpful. So he, as he said to him, when we talked to him, he said, quote, "I want clarity, alignment, and ownership in the future. 3 things that we cannot achieve internally on our own." So that's when he reached out to us to see if this approach made sense. He talked to superintendents in other districts who had used this methodology before. And as he said, and again, I'll quote, "I believe our district needs a community-driven strategic framework that genuinely reflects the values, aspirations, and concerns of the people we serve." So he and his board understood how sustainable change requires shared ownership, not just district ownership. And the methodology that we're here to talk about today did that for him.
Yeah. So, I mean, the question is, what is this future search process that Dr. Smith elected to use over the other ones? The surveys and focus groups and everything. Back in the day, school administrators would just create a strategic plan themselves, but then they'd have to sell that plan to the community, and inevitably opposition would spring up because people would feel that their needs were not considered. I'm guessing that many of your listeners probably have experienced that. But so then practice has changed to try to engage the community, and what I call the hub and spoke model of community engagement, where the hub is the district, and you have these spokes coming out from there And you can imagine a spoke to a stakeholder group going to parents, and a spoke going to business leaders and students and maybe others in the community. But all the integration of all that input has to still go through the hub, through the district. And the administration would say, meet with each stakeholder group to get their perspective and ideas. That was better than just doing it yourself because you were getting more input and contact with your community. But then the superintendent would still have to balance and prioritize between all the needs of these different groups, some of which maybe actually have conflicting needs. And of course, then some group would feel shortchanged, and then you'd still have to deal with opposition. So the idea instead, Future Search, which is a process developed in the 80s, as Drew was saying, it rejects that hub and spoke model for one in which the stakeholders talk with one another. People who normally don't have contact actually talk to one another. Like, what a concept, right? And by doing this, they're learning about other perspectives and breaking down the silos that often lead to polarization.
Yeah.
So to put it sort of succinctly, what is Future Search? Future Search is a process that provides a forum for diverse stakeholder groups to jointly contribute to a vision of the future through discovery of their common ground and to work together towards implementation of the future that everybody wants.
It's something that's ringing true for me on the conversation. What I'm hearing is when you're able to bring all those stakeholders to the table, the criticisms and challenges that the strategic vision is inevitably going to have might be reduced because everybody felt like this. We actually came up with this plan together. Remember, guys, that was just a few weeks ago we did it. Versus here's our plan, community, and like it or not, this is how we're moving forward. And people are like, wait, that's not reflective of what I believe to be true or want to be true for my district. So that's really interesting. I don't know, guys, if you could comment on, I can make some assumptions, but I'd rather hear from the experts. When you talk about bringing these voices and identifying common ground, in your experience, what were some of the voices that were missing a seat before, right? That districts, whether it was intentional or inadvertent, who are those voices?
Yeah, so actually, that's a good segue to what I was thinking about. But I also want to say, in response to what you said, that Drew and I had a project to look at the data from all the future searches he's done in Wisconsin.
Okay.
And we interviewed 19 superintendents, and we asked them, whether this worked. And one of the things that they said was that it gave them the sense that when people ask, well, why are you doing that? Well, we're doing that because the community told us to, because you all wanted it, So, but I think the thing that guides Future Search is these 4 principles. And the first one is exactly what you're talking about, which is to get the right people in the room. It's just so important. And it's not just teachers and parents. There are other stakeholders in the school's community. So, for instance, the local chamber of commerce, business people, clergy, police, elected officials, early childhood providers, higher education, leaders of community organizations, nonprofits in the community. And traditionally, I think strategic plan hasn't included those groups as inputs. And so, sometimes each community has a different profile of the different collection of who are the stakeholders. And so the planning is really important. I think Drew is going to talk about that in a little bit. So those are examples. And the other thing, that when you get all these people together, the idea is to get a shared view of the whole system before you try to make any plans. And so the way we think about this is like, imagine looking at an elephant, and it's an elephant because you can see the whole gigantic animal, right? As long as you don't get too close, But imagine there's this old Indian legend of 6 blind men approaching the elephant, and each one touching a different part, and they each describe it differently. The one who touches the leg says he's got a tree, the one who touches the trunk thinks it's a snake, etc. But they can't actually accurately describe the elephant until they start talking to one another. and comparing notes. And it's the same thing with a complex system like a school's community. No one group fully understands the whole situation. They can only effectively plan when they all get a shared view, which of course can only happen when they talk with one another. The third principle is to focus on the future, not the past conflicts, but to seek common ground. And when groups focus on the past conflicts and their differences, they get bogged down, and it's kind of demoralizing also. And so future search is not, as Drew said, a conflict resolution process where when people get together and focus on the future, they actually find that they have a lot in common. Like,
Right.
What do we want our current kindergartners to learn by the time they graduate? There's not a lot of disagreement about that, you know? And finally, the fourth principle, which guides future search, is self-management and responsibility for action. You know, many of the structures and procedures that are incorporated in future search emphasize the participants' responsibility for getting things done. It's not the consultants that are going to do it. And there's a kind of a side effect that the methodology teaches participants how to have an effective meeting. And a lot of people don't know how to have a good meeting, you know. And as there are anywhere from 60 to 160 participants in a future search, shared responsibility for managing all of that is really needed. Yeah,
Definitely, the majority of people probably don't know how to have a good meeting. So that rings true.
that's one of the complaints I have in my consulting work is like our meetings go on and on. We have somebody monopolizing, or
Right. Or
common.
people not taking action, ownership of what's going to happen. And then you feel like you've just wasted time. Nothing's moving forward, no progress.
Right.
But yeah, thank you for going over those four principles. I like the example of the metaphor of the elephant. I've heard that one before. And I think also it illustrates, right, if you're too close to the problem, not only if you're not talking to one another, but if you're too close to the problem too, you need to zoom out to get some perspective a lot of
Yeah.
times.
Yep.
But yeah, Drew, what does go into the future search planning process?
Yeah. So as we were just talking about, the question is, how do you get the whole system in the room? And I have found, we have found one of the best ways to do that is to ask respected individuals from key stakeholding groups to come together and help to plan the process and become ambassadors to the community for this. So this planning or design team essentially becomes a microcosm of the community. And as Jeff alluded to, the makeup of this group varies from community to community. In some districts, for example, there's representation from an agricultural community or a faith group, or some communities have major employers. In other districts, none of those things are relevant. So you have to first determine who are the key stakeholders in any given community. And back to Dr. Smith's situation, we had the usual stakeholders: parents, staff, students, administrators, board, industry partners. But then they also included faith-based groups, youth-serving organizations, early childhood providers, higher education, and the district's education foundation. So they determined who the key stakeholders were. As externals, we wouldn't know that. But once they say these are the key stakeholding groups, we then ask them to identify individuals, respected, well-known individuals within each group, and we bring them together as a planning team. And that group is usually 10 to 15 people. They meet, say, 3 evenings before the meeting itself. And they are the folks that are critical for getting the right people in the room. Citizens expect a superintendent or a board member to call them up or email them and say, hey, this is important, right? That's their job. But when you get someone who's well-known, respected, that is not obviously connected to the district and saying, this is important for our district and our community, please considering attending, that sends a different message, different weight to it. And so those ambassadors, if you will, on the design team are really critical to get the right people in the room. And I'll tell you that one of Dr. Smith's concerns about sponsoring a future search was, will the right people show up? You can invite them, but they may not be interested.
Yeah.
So
Right.
In the event itself, as we were starting, I asked Dr. Smith, I said, look around. I said, did you get the right people to show up? And he looked around the room and he said, yes, they are here. Now, I wouldn't know that, but he does. And again, I'll attribute
Right.
to getting the right people in the room to the design team, those ambassadors who are out there, and a real solid communications plan. So anyhow, to answer your question, that group got together for 3 times. We looked at the design of the future search model. They made some decisions about how to customize it for their situation. And we had a whole design that lasted 12 hours. It's spread out over 3 sessions. So it's one conversation spread out over 3 segments of time, all within 1 week. So it's a big ask. I mean, this is not drop by a focus group or take a survey type of thing. It's a big ask. But in all of the districts I've worked with, ranging from 1,500 citizens to almost 100,000 citizens, every group can attract anywhere from 60 to 200 people. Because if you make the right case about this is important to the future of our district, people will show up and they will be really involved with this. And so not only do you have specific outcomes, such as identify issues and trends that are impacting our district or identify the priorities, equally as important is that you have people coming out of that who build strong relationships with each other that they didn't necessarily have before. And there's a lot more trust and partnership as a result of bringing the folks together. So as you know, all of us know, the key to a good meeting is planning and logistics. And when you bring a large group like this, from a logistics perspective, you got to make sure people are feel welcomed, feel excited. And in Dr. Smith's case, he says, I want them to be curious. When they walk into this room, I want them to go, this is a different kind of meeting. And so you got to figure out ways to make people interested and curious about this meeting that they're going into. And one of the many ways you can do this is to showcase student activities, right? So you could have students, a jazz band playing in the background or a string quartet, you could have showcase of student projects, demonstrating agriculture projects or robotic projects or art projects, all sorts of ways to demonstrate to the community, hey, this is what's going on in your school district today. And it gets their attention and interested in having a conversation.
Right. I'll give some feedback and reflections. Like, what I'm hearing, it's contrasting it with meetings that happen in our standard within school systems. This is actually, it's more like an event is how I would frame it. Yeah. And it's fantastic that Dr. Smith said, yeah, the right people are in the room. They're curious, they're excited about what's going on. Back to the ambassador messages, because they expect the school district to reach out, but it's when it's that, pillar in the community and they're reaching out saying this is important, that message lands well. And something that, I just want to challenge the listeners that are, engaging with this content. Like, you're right. It's a big ask, but it's the right ask to make. And what's weird is I'm going to talk about business and marketing and how that relates to schools in this sense, because some of my mentors that advise me on how to reach more ruckus makers, right? And my whole point of view is ruckus makers do school different. We're reimagining education within a traditional system so that we create campus experiences we're showing up for. They contrast a lot of times what they call peanut butter marketing, where you take all your resources and you spread a thin layer throughout the entire year, right? And they say that's stupid. Don't market that way. They have a better way. And in some respects, I think the future search is contrasted to sort of peanut butter strategy that just kind of spread out throughout the school year and it never really sticks. So in the business world, the contrast to peanut butter marketing is what they call a lightning strike. But it's when you pull together 80% of your resources and you go big in a very concentrated, small amount of time to have the best business outcome that you can get. But the same is true in schools, right? So 12 hours, big ask. But 3 days, you said, and you spread it out and you create a legendary outcome at the end of 3 days that most districts that waste way more than 12 hours spread out over a year, they never even get to. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So like this is a fantastic way of doing school different, in my words, or how I talk about stuff. But
I love
this is
that.
great.
Yeah, I love that idea. And many times people will say, well, people aren't going to come. It's too much of an ask. And they end up having, 2 years worth of 2-hour meetings that they can't get a strategic plan out of, or they get a plan and it sits on a shelf and it never gets implemented. So that's another problem. So the question is then, what happens during those 3 days, those three events to make all this happen? And so I want to just go through what comprises a Future Search conference or a Future Search event. I like that idea. So the first thing is that, participants review the past. They fill in timelines. They get colored markers. They fill in timelines for, say, like the past 30 years or so, and they put on those timelines global events, local events, and then also personal events, weddings, graduations, births, divorces even, and they can see, as you said, taking a step back, and they see how global events may have affected us, for instance. And then they survey the present, and they brainstorm current trends that are impacting, our schools. And then they vote on which trends are the most significant, the most important that we have to respond to. And an important activity in this part is for stakeholder groups to talk about their feelings, which is something they don't usually do. And this activity we structure as either a couple of different ways of doing it. One way is prouds and sorries. The idea is that each stakeholder group says things that they're proud of, that they can crow about, that they have responded to these trends, and also the sorries, the things they regret about how they have managed or not managed to effectively respond to these current trends. Or another way to put it, and I think this is what was done in Dr. Smith's district, was glads, sads, and mads. And each of the stakeholder group had to think about things that they're happy about, they're glad about, things that they're kind of make them kind of sad, and then the things they're angry about. And just to give some examples from that particular Future Search was, the higher education stakeholder group, things they were glad about. They cited the district's diverse offerings that students had. That was from their point of view, that made them happy. And then local business leaders, they were sad because they were concerned about the students' health and well-being. That was something they saw from where they sat. And then the students themselves, they've expressed anger about their perception that there was a general lack of respect for others. And so once they looked at both the past and the present and hear from all the stakeholders, everyone now has that shared view. They have the shared view of the whole system, the whole elephant, and only then can they start to plan for the future. And then the third part gets the participants to envision the future that everyone wants. And we do this in a kind of fun and playful way by presenting scenarios of a preferred future. And this can be done with a diagram, a letter to a friend who hasn't been to the district in 15 years, a game show, a YouTube video, a podcast, or a skit of some kind. So it gets, the energy is very high at this point. People are really excited and they're having fun also, but they're also envisioning, what do we all want? And when they see all the scenarios presented, they realize that there's a lot of common elements in all the presentations. And there are things that everyone wants. And in this way, they can discover the common ground, and then they can start to agree on which ones to prioritize. And so, Dr. Smith was worried the right people would show up, but also if they did, would then conflicts arise. And he wondered if the time commitment would be worth the investment. And as we said, like in this case, 130 people participated. And the trust building and alignment that he was looking for happened. If he said it was transformational.
Do you have some examples of like some of those common ground topics that are unearthed and identified, because I think that's really interesting to me.
Yeah. So in that case, in the case of Dr. Smith's school district, here are some of the priorities that emerged. That they wanted strong partnerships with the community and nurturing the community engagement. I think they got energized by the Future Search itself, and we want more of this. They wanted the district to start to have individual learning plans, personalized learning plans for both the staff and the students. And that seemed actually pretty, offbeat and innovative. I mean, a lot of districts have individual learning plans aimed at the pupils. But this group said, we should have the staff should also be engaged in learning plans. They wanted some, increased focus on college and career readiness, including the trades. They wanted the students to have exposure to a lot of options, real-life applications, and experiential learning. And that's helped by when you have people from the business community as part of this process, you can even start to form internship programs at an auto body shop or something like that, where the students would have experiences that they would not otherwise have had. They also wanted legislative advocacy. They wanted the school district to be active in trying to get increased funding, getting referendum passed that could be supported by the whole community. They wanted to have policies that would attract and retain staff members, wellness programs, flexibility, childcare. Digital citizenship and balanced responsibility was another priority. They wanted a thoughtful and balanced use of technology. Sometimes students in these future searches say they want actually less computers. They're sort of tired of sitting in front of a computer. They want more interaction. So getting that balance is really important.
So, if I could just add there, Jeff, I mean, as you go through these, some of these are not new. I mean, they're the kind of things many districts think about, but the ideas on how to actually accomplish some of these came up in these scenarios and skits that the administration and the board were going, oh, that's interesting. We hadn't thought of it that way. And so it's not, so the priorities that come out, many of them just reinforce what district leadership knows we need to focus on. Some things will always come up that will cause them to pause and go, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of it this way before. And some ideas are just like, incredible. We got to think about how to make this happen. So the community is not telling the district what to do, but they're telling the district, here is what we think is important. These are the things we value. And we'd like to see these values and ideas reflected in your plan. And so that relationship between engaging the community as a piece of data that feeds into the planning process is something that is a real important dynamic from an administrator's perspective.
I would also add to that because those people are there, the potential partners have emerged also. And so it's not only these are the things we want, but we're willing to help.
That's maybe an unexpected, very positive result, right? Where you think that, oh man, this is going to be a lot to execute the strategy and the plan. But by bringing all these people together and having a voice, like a real actual voice at the table, they say, hey, can I help? This is ours to execute, right? That's what I'm hearing you say.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
As you might anticipate, Danny, probably some of the most profound voices, of course, are the students, right? I mean,
oh, absolutely. Yeah.
When they speak up and they talk about what they're glad, sad, and mad about, or what they think are the issues and trends that are impacting the school district, people listen very carefully. And almost all groups 100%. Say that without the students, this would not have been a successful conversation.
It's amazing how often that step gets missed. So 2 points, and then we got to get to the last questions I ask all my guests. But
sure.
One, when I'm coaching school leaders, they'll bring up something about the student experience, and I'll just ask like the very obvious question: have you asked the students what they think about this issue? And often, not all the time, but often it's oh yeah, I should do that. And like, yeah, you should. the other thing I wanted to say, just because it's still a revolutionary idea, I don't know how, but the best onboarding experience I ever had as a teacher was when a school, Kenwood Academy, and shout out to Liz Kirby, who was the legendary principal there. They had a student panel for all the new teachers, and the kids did not edit themselves. They told us exactly what we were stepping into on that campus, and they were right. And I really appreciated that because, the system, the campus, or whatever, they're going to paint a picture that here's what your life is going to be like as a teacher, and yeah, maybe in an ideal world. But the kids told us, like, here's what it's like to work with us. And that got me even more excited, right? And it was candid and it was real. So I just so appreciated, that perspective. ODP Business Solutions, formerly Office Depot Business Solutions Division, has been a trusted partner for schools for 30 years. At ODP Business Solutions, we're by your side to meet your evolving education needs. Now, picture this: a learning environment so engaging students forget to check their phones. Sounds impossible? That's exactly what we helped Belago Academy create. Their secret? Working with ODP Business Solutions to build collaborative spaces that actually work. We didn't just deliver furniture, we delivered a completely new way of learning. From tech integration that makes lessons come alive, to flexible spaces that adapt to any teaching style, to sustainable solutions that reduce your carbon footprint. We're here to help you do school different. And the best part, you get it all from a single supplier. All to help you simplify ordering and streamline budgeting while staying compliant with easy access to cooperative contracts. However you want to advance, ODP Business Solutions has 30 years of experience helping districts like yours get ahead. Visit odpbusiness.com/education to learn more. That's odpbusiness.com/education. Summer sets the tone. When the professional learning is intentional and built for collaboration, it can strengthen culture before the year even begins. Frontline Education's 2026 K-12 Lens Survey Report found staffing pressure has eased overall, but gaps still remain. Districts reporting easier hiring are more likely to have professional growth that's structured and targeted to individual goals. So learning carries well beyond onboarding and supports ongoing improvement. Nearly half of districts that use software to manage and provide professional growth say hiring has gotten easier compared to 30% that don't use software. Download the full K-12 Lens Report at frontlineeducation.com/leaders to see the data and the practices behind stronger culture and retention. You can get that report at frontlineeducation.com/leaders. As a school leader, time is your greatest resource, and there is a real sense of urgency when it comes to getting students what they need right now. That's why I love IXL's Universal Screener. In 20 minutes or less, you can identify students in need of intervention. And IXL's Learning Adaptive Platform makes differentiating instruction easy. As students learn, IXL adjusts to the right level of difficulty for each individual student. Get started today at ixl.com/leaders. That's ixl.com/leaders. So, Drew and Jeff, we could talk about Future Search for the next, 11 hours because it's a 12-hour process, and I've enjoyed this conversation. But I'd like to get us to the last three questions I ask all my guests. And so, number one, and we'd love to hear from both of you. If you could put one message on all school marquees around the world for a single day, what would your message be?
So I guess I'll go first.
Go for it.
I would put on the marquees in neon letters: the community needs our school needs the community. Let's talk.
Right on.
Yeah, real similar, Jeff. For me, strong schools require strong community partnerships. and those just don't naturally evolve. Someone has to initiate that. And that, I believe, is best done by the administration and the board to get that conversation going.
Right. And if you were both building your dream school, there were no limitations in terms of resources. Your only constraint was your ability to imagine. If you could both just give me a guiding principle of building that dream campus, what would it be?
You go first this time. I
Yeah.
went first
So
last time, Drew.
it's less. The principle for me is captured in a kind of an equation or a formula, and Jeff's seen me talk about this.
Okay.
It's Q times A equals R. The R means results, and the question is, how do you go about
Right.
getting your best results? You need good quality ideas, and you need acceptance.
Mm.
So now, when I went to school, anything times 0 was 0. I think that's still the case today. And what I have seen is a lot of great ideas not become a result because the acceptance was a 0 or a low number. And so when you think about an intended result or consequence, we have to ask ourselves, is the quality idea there and is the acceptance there? And in both cases, you get higher quality, more acceptance when you bring the right people together and have dialogue about possibilities. So you diverge in your thinking and then you converge on a solution. And that formula, if you will, kind of captures the principle.
Makes sense. Thanks for sharing it. Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, it's funny. I think that's a very nice, succinct equation. Drew told me mine was a little wordy, but I guess this is the verbal equivalent, which is the main principle is that I don't know everything. I need to tap all the stakeholders in the community to find out their needs and their ideas. Otherwise, I'll be spending my time either fighting them to get my vision or having to explain my vision to them. But this way, I'm implementing their vision. That's my principle.
That reminds me a lot of Zig Ziglar, who talked about, you can have anything in life as long as you help others get what they want in life. And it's just,
Right.
whenever leaders are talking to me, how do I get the staff to do this? I say, well, do you know what they want to accomplish this year? Like, what's the number one thing they want to do for themselves on campus in the next 12 months? And again, I'm not sure. We'll figure that out, help them do it, and then they're going to do whatever you want. I guarantee, like, this is the path. It's easy. That's the easy mode. But yeah, anyways. Okay, I'd love for you both to have the last word. We've covered a lot of ground in today's conversation. So Drew and Jeff, what's the one thing you want a ruckus maker to remember?
Yeah, so Drew is in Wisconsin. I'm in New Jersey. And I think I would want people to know that there are people who do future search all over the country and all over the world. And there's a network of people who are trained to do future search. You can find them at futuresearch.net. So my main thing I want people to take away is to fully engage your community, and don't just ask them for help, but engage them, and have a community develop North Star of priorities that will keep everyone pulling in the same direction. That's what I think is a takeaway.
Last night, I was with a planning team in a rural community in Wisconsin. It was their second planning session, and the understanding of the scope of this event became increasingly clear. I mean, this is a big deal, right? And as I was debriefing this with the superintendent after all the design team members left, he said to me, "Hey, this is a big deal. There's a lot involved in the planning of it, and we're asking a lot of people." And then he said, he says, "This will help our district and will make my job much better because we know what the community values and what their aspirations are for the district. And this will help me be a better leader." So to your question, it's a significant commitment and yields significant lasting results.
Hey, Ruckus Makers, thanks again for pressing play. I hope you enjoyed the show as much as I enjoyed creating it for you. And before you go, if today's episode shifted something in you so that you want to do school different, or maybe you have a new idea about how to reimagine education on your campus, then check out My Principal Coach. It's your AI-powered leadership mentor. It's trained on 10 years of mastermind and private coaching experience that I've had. It's like having a world-class ruckus maker mentor in your pocket 24/7. You can start your free 7-day trial at myprincipalcoach.com.